Well, welcome to those who are here, those who are visiting, welcome as well. I wasn't here last week, was I? Now that I'm thinking about it. Good. So it's good to see you alive. You survived like I did. A joy. Jody, your family, great to see you guys here. Priscilla and Arturo. Did I remember that right? And family, good. And guys, good. And those that I haven't seen in a while, Deirdre, you're alive and well. Makes us... Everybody. Deirdre's alive and well. Man, I'm not ready to lose Deirdre, you see. So Deirdre, tell you, glad to see you. Glad to see you. We've been through so much in the last few weeks. Now I think I remember. Last time I was here, I was crying up front. And here we are, guys. Life. New challenges every day. You know, new weights. And it is what it is. And I think I was with somebody earlier in my office who was, going through so much. And I said, hey, I don't know if you thought that when you became a Christian or you started coming to church that these problems would go away. But if somebody told you that, they were overselling this whole thing. Problems are going to continue just as much, maybe more, in fact. But the difference is that you're not alone. Like Deirdre was saying earlier, it's one thing to go through these things alone, and it's a whole other thing to know that we have a community and to know that we're there for one another. So yes. So friends, for those who are not used to what we're doing here every week, we've been studying the Gospel of Matthew for now almost 3 years now, or 2 years. 2 full years, 2 years. In January it'll be 2 years, and we're almost there. Today we're going to start reading chapter 24. The book has 28 chapters, so we're getting there. If you need a Bible, there's one underneath your seats. But I'm going to read the whole thing to you. So if you want to nap, this is the moment to start, all right? So get comfortable, nap, because the weather's perfect. There's tea over there if you want to get the nap going, with tea. So go do that, and let's just enjoy time together of learning and growing. So we've been studying the Gospel of Matthew. Why? Why have you been studying the Gospel of Matthew, Tiago, with the church? Because since before here, when I was a teacher, I always imagined being a pastor and just leading the congregation through the gospel, walking with Jesus every week, even if they got bored after a while, but we just need to go through the whole thing to truly see and understand what the world looks like, what our life looks like through the angle, through the path opened up by Jesus. So that's what we're doing every week. So if you came into the building looking for the church where you get yelled at for not being good enough, you came into the wrong place, you see. If you came into the building here looking for to get yelled at because you're being too good, you came into the wrong place too. Here is just a place where we gather to be with one another, to maybe learn something new, and to remind ourselves that we're not alone, and that's going to be okay. We're going to walk together. Now today I'm a little worried because the discourse, the words of Jesus are going to get a little heavier. All right? I talked about it earlier when we did our Sabbath school, and I'll mention it today again. The words are going to be heavier not because they're heavy, but because the words of Jesus here are going to touch on areas of our life, of our religious imagination that we hold dear to. And normally what happens when you sort of touch on a nerve is we feel uncomfortable. Now, we felt uncomfortable before. I think the last time we felt uncomfortable was when I talked a little bit about politics from up here, when we talked about give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and to God what belongs to God. It's still on YouTube. You can still watch it. I asked everybody if you were okay after that one, and everybody was very silent. And then somebody came to me and I said, I don't think anybody was comfortable here today. And I said, that's great, because that means we're reading the words of Jesus right. Sometimes the words of Jesus give us rest and healing and peace. But some other times they're going to make us uncomfortable. And normally we feel uncomfortable because normally the words are touching, again, on areas, on spaces of our heart and our imagination that we're so used to, that we consider true and right, and that anything that might shed nuance and more that doesn't fit into the paradigm that we already have, it makes us feel uneasy. So even as I was reading the text for this week, I felt uneasy. So that's what we're going to do today. Try to feel uneasy together. Okay? That's what we're doing. Let me give you the introduction that I normally do for those who weren't here. So I want to make sure that you're in the loop, right? We're not here to listen to Pastor Tiago scream information. We're here to learn together. In order to learn together, I can't just start talking. I need to catch you up because it's been 2 weeks where we were last time and where we are now. So Jesus is in Jerusalem. He was at the temple throughout several chapters there. After long speeches and sequences of words against the scribes and Pharisees and religious leaders of the time, Jesus sort of drops the mic. That's where we are. He says everything he needs to, drop the mics, and walks away from the temple, the center of religious power of the time. So after speaking truth to power, after healing people as a way to reveal who he was, because remember, every week I read the chapter and it's like there's 11,000 things that we can talk about. I have to choose one. But as Jesus heals people on the temple, the people who are there seeing it just didn't see a guy healing people. They knew from the words of the prophets that when blind people started seeing, that when people who weren't able to walk began walking, that was a sign that the future was here, that the Messiah was here. That was the sign. So Jesus not only spoke words of truth that made people uneasy, but he worked miracles so that in the imagination of the Israelites at the time they saw, the time is here. This is the one. So this has been a powerful sort of event sequence of chapters that we've been reading because it reveals who Jesus truly is. That the new day has come. And that was liberation to many people, and it made religious leaders who had the control of people and the power extremely uncomfortable. Because suddenly they weren't the thing. Jesus was. So that's what's been happening thus far. So then Jesus leaves the temple, and here we are. So today we will begin following Jesus out of the temple, up the Mount of Olives, that's right by the city, or the old city of Jerusalem there, to listen to the words of Jesus concerning the end of the story of humanity, what religious people like to call the end times. We're going to get very apocalyptic here today, friends. Remember those days, those old movies? So I'm not going to scream, but that's what we're going to talk about today. We're there. So we're going to do that, and I'm glad we are reaching this section of Matthew today, now, because much has happened to the world in the last couple of years. Have you guys been around? Have you heard of COVID? Yeah. A lot has happened. And these last 2 years, what has been happening is this revival within religious circles to get into the mood again of end-time expectation, just like the people of Israel. So now here is the difficult part. All right? We are already there. We have ideas, we have conclusions, we have a whole hermeneutic that places us in the world to interpret things, from COVID to religion to society, in very specific ways. So we are coming. You came in through the doors with all of those things inside of your bodies right now. The problem is when we open the Bible now, we have another perception of things. And the uncomfortable nature of what we're doing together is taking what we know and consider absolute truth and have to come to terms with Jesus and the possibility that maybe He's pointing to a whole different direction. So that by the end of the study here today, you're going to have a decision to make. That either I'm going to go with what I already think is true and good, or not what Pastor is saying, no, the possibility. We deal and work with possibilities. The possibility that there's more. And that maybe, just maybe, there are different ways of looking at the same thing. Are we all right thus far? Or are you already feeling uncomfortable? I hope not. Are we okay? All right. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm glad we're here now. So our challenge today is to bring to the table our convictions, our assurances about the end times, and to allow Jesus to shape them, to bring light to them, so that we might live by what Jesus truly reveals about the end, and not about what pastors or people or prophets are talking about when we talk about the end. What I am offering you today is not Tiago's spin. What I'm offering you today is my vulnerability of not knowing what the thing is and trying to figure that out with you together as we read the words of Jesus. Okay? So let's read. We're going to read 14 verses. It's normally a lot. Yesterday I did a video for Brazil, 2 verses of the book of James, 56 minutes. So I'm going to try to calm down here today and just offer you where I am in putting these things together. Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 through 14. Here we go. Jesus left the temple and was going away when his disciples came to point out to him the building of the temple. Large structure. But Jesus answered them, "You see all of these things here, do you not? Truly I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon the other that will not be thrown down." Verse 3. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, short little hike, by the way. You walk out of the gates, half an hour walk. Beautiful. You can see from up there a whole old city of Jerusalem, the temple at the time. So he had a privileged view of the whole thing. So there they are. The disciples came to him privately saying, "Tell us, Jesus, when will these things be?" What things? Primarily right now, the destruction of the temple. You're saying that this thing is going to be brought down. What is? They're confused. Immediately. There's something that's going to happen and they can't place it because remember, in their imagination they thought Jesus would take over the whole thing and be the guy, right? So now Jesus is saying that he's going to die. We discussed that before. And that the temple now is going to fall down and they're extremely confused. When will these things be? Secondly, what will be the sign of your coming? And before we think of second coming, by the way, remember, that's not in the mind of the disciples. They're not like Adventists waiting for the second. They think that Jesus is. When will you sort of appear? When will you reveal yourself as the Messiah? When will that end? When will that thing happen? Your true coming, your revelation, when will that be? For us, we read it, obviously pointing to the future, but the disciples are confused, just as we might be as well. So give us signs of when it will happen. And as you're at it, of the end of the age. Meaning, tell us what the end of the story looks like. Jesus. All right, let's keep reading. Jesus answered them. And here we go. See that no one leads you astray. Leading astray is language of paths, of hikes, of there is a path. See that people don't distract you, don't lead you away from the path. And what is the path of Jesus, friends? Is it a body of ideas about God and doctrines? No. The way is a way to live. This is why we've been studying the gospel since chapter 1. The way of Jesus is a way of being in the world. Does that come with particular ideas and understandings and doctrines? For sure. But the thing is not the ideas, the thing is the life. Okay? So see that people do not lead you astray from the path. Astray. So how might that happen? Jesus starts the list. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they will lead many astray. That is one way it will happen. We'll get there in a minute. Verse 6, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see that you are not alarmed. For all of these things must take place, but the end is not yet. Verse 7. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning. They are like birth pains, contractions. Mothers, you know that feeling. Contractions, the pain, the signs that there's something coming, but the pain is not the thing, is it? It's just signs. Verse 9, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by many nations. For what? Because you believed in doctrine A, B, or C? No, because you carry in you, as you live, my name. You will be hated because of my name in you. Let's keep reading. Verse 10. And then many will fade away, and there will be betrayal one another, and they will hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of lawlessness, and then we've been with Jesus long enough, we know that lawlessness is just not keeping commandments. It's more. Lawlessness is not living by justice, mercy, and faithfulness. In fact, look at what Jesus says. There will be lawlessness. It will be increased. And what will be the result? And people will not believe in truth anymore. No, when there is lawlessness, what happens? It's right here. Love will grow cold. There you go. Because if there's no mercy, if there's no justice, if there's no faithfulness, then friends, there's no love. That's what the law is all about. Living, mercy, justice, faithfulness, and love. Verse 13, but the one who endures. Endures in what? In carrying my name. In living by love. He will be saved. Verse 14, in this gospel. What gospel? What I've been speaking to you thus far will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. All right? Camilla, did you read that? Was that pretty good? Scary stuff, isn't it? It's going to be okay, though. Don't worry. All right, friends. So then I was reading this week, and I was saying, okay, where to begin, right? How to start cutting this cake here, Dave? You know what I mean? Hard. So I decided to share some things. Some things are not all things. I don't know about all things. I might have an idea about some things, and that's what I'm sharing with you today. In the hope that this is not the final word. I'm not the pastor who says, this is it, now go and obey. No, this is the beginning of a conversation, of a self-criticism, of reflecting upon our heart, our imagination, to see if what we believe is in harmony with what Jesus is sharing to his disciples and to all of us today. So disciples focus their question to Jesus on three elements that we read together. When will the destruction of the temple be? When will your coming, your revelation happen? And when will the end of the age come? In order to know, they ask Jesus for signs. Give us a heads up. Are you guys with me? Give us an idea as to when, and then we'll know. Signs, therefore, my friends, are signs. They're not the thing. They're just signs for the coming of the thing that matters. Jesus' revelation. The end of the age. The end of the story. Signs are symptoms. They're pointers to the real thing. And as the disciples, for ages, religious people have been attracted, just like the Pharisees were always asking Jesus to show more signs, more and more signs. And Jesus says, I'm not going to give you any more signs because you're interested in signs and not in me, and not into the thing. So for ages that has been the case. We are more interested in the signs, in the pointers, than in the thing itself. We want to have an assurance that we are close, that we are there, Leslie, to this whatever end of the age thing. For ages that has been the case. And since the day I was born into the church situation, right? Not born in the church, born in the hospital, but immediately brought to the church. 37 years now. I'm hearing every week, Every month, every year, the time is here. It's here. That president is in office. The time is now. The Pope has changed, I think, 4 times since I was born. They go slow over there. Now it's going to happen. Now this, now that. Signs, 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 signs. And I tell you, here we are. And if you open the news, and you're going to probably be trying to figure out if there's another sign out there that we've missed. Signs. Now there's a psychology behind this, okay? When I say psychology, there is something happening in our minds, in our bodies, that sometimes we can't put a finger on and we don't know about. There's a psychology behind this desire to be in the loop of the sign sequence thing so that we can be ready. And the psychology, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, I just like to think psychologically, but at least 2 things that come to my mind. The psychology behind this. The psychology here is partly related to a true desire to see things happening in our time. Wouldn't it be great, right? If we were just these people hearing the words of Jesus that are persecuted and killed, and but we like to be in the sense that we're there, that we're going to see it happen. That it's our turn, so too bad for everybody who came before. It's us, and that doesn't come from a wrong place. It's okay to feel like you're the thing, right? That you're going to be the generation that is going to be there when it all happens. That's part of the psychology. It's this desire to see things happening. But it's almost a sort of a narcissistic desire, isn't it? Because deep down, it's about us being there, right? Us having the grasp of what is happening. And like I said, too bad for everybody else who wasn't here now, 2021. So it's almost a narcissistic desire because it's more about me and you being there than the actual events themselves almost. Jesus' revelation, His work in the world. So that's part of the psychology. Another part of the psychology, number 2, is related, I think, to a fear. And by the way, I just didn't bring these out of the thin air. I'm describing my experience. When I say psychology, I'm telling you what I have felt and what I have seen in myself when I think about the question, I want to be there when it happens. Number 1, it's truly about me being there. Until later I realized that the thing is already happening. God's work has already happened and we get to participate in that now. And then I realized that the whole thing were just distractions to that real thing. So it's not that we are abandoning signs, we are discerning signs. But we are not making signs the thing. So I'm sharing my experience with you. Narcissistic. About me being there. And losing sight of everything else that Jesus talked about in the process. Element number 2. It's related to a fear. So number 1, a narcissistic desire. Number 2, a fear. What fear? The fear of not being ready. Have you guys felt that fear? I had a girl write me this week from Brazil. I get tons of messages every week. When I say tons, I mean hundreds of messages every year, every week. From people who are young, from people who are old. And this young lady said, Tiago, I love Jesus. I think it's great. But right now I'm thinking of committing suicide. Because every time I go to church, I realize that I'm not ready. And there's so much more for me to change before I feel God accepts me, so I'd rather just die now than carry the guilt of not being enough. Do you understand how the psychology is not a little joke that we play around? That if I turn the tables here and just preach doom and despair for everybody, that this affects people. So I wrote her, I said, my dear one, you're loved. I know you've been subject to the preaching of a lot of people who are very concerned about a lot of things, and you can't blame them. But just make sure that you understand that the way God sees you is not necessarily as it has been described to you right now. So we've been there, haven't we? The fear of not being ready. Constant fear. If I'm going to describe my childhood and young experience at the church, it was an experience of constant fear. Of not being good enough, of not being ready and not being able to discern the signs, and then looking for signs because I was all messed up, so I needed a heads up to just get my stuff ready so that I could be ready whenever it's time. So there's a psychology behind this that taps into some things that are very human, that are very basic to all of us. This fear of losing the future, of losing salvation, of losing life. And then we forget, when we are in this bubble of fear, we forget the very basic things that Jesus told us, which is, fear not what is to come. Do not worry about the day of tomorrow. I have it. I'll take care of it. Just live as servants, as people who have understood what I'm doing in the world now. Don't worry about figuring out when you're ready or not ready. I'm not looking for that. God is looking for true worshipers who are living in spirit and truth, in transparency, in kindness toward others, wherever they go, so you can live in that now and not fear for what is to come. So if I'm going to describe my childhood in this thing that we call religion and church, it was a childhood of fear, and I know most of you have experienced it and may still be experiencing it right now. I was with one of the church members just now earlier. I told you in Sabbath school. Fearful because she was in church and not at home with her kids, and fearful that if she was with her kids, she would be, under the plan of God for her life. I said, friend, go home right now. God is good. He looks at you and He smiles because you're loved as you are. He doesn't need you to sit down here so He can say, all right, let's see who's here in the rows so that we can write your name in the book. That's how I grew up. And I'm telling you, it's not a healthy situation. Why? Because we're so caught up in that fear and being saved that we lose sight of the poor. We lose sight of the people who are suffering right next to us. We lose sight of ourselves. Are we getting it? There's a psychology, and we need to be honest with ourselves. Fear. So because there's not much going on sometimes in our religious life, because we all pretend in here, but we go home. I hope you're not pretending anymore, because it's okay to be yourself, but I still have to explain that to people still. You go home and you know your sins, your mistakes, your shortcomings, don't you? You know the things that you're embarrassed about, right? So we're so caught up in all that stuff that we need a heads up. Say, hey, the sign is happening. And they're like, okay, let me let go of everything else because I want to be ready for when Jesus comes. That's the psychology, and it's a bad thing because we're always anxious. We're always fearful. We're always missing what God is doing in the world because of all of it. So yeah, we need signs so that we can let go of whatever sin we're committing so that we can start doing religious things, right? The things that God, whatever, wants. So this is why over the years people have given more time and interest to signs and not to what the signs point to. And in the end, we are more distracted with news and newspapers and signs than actually, like I said, participating in the kingdom of heaven, in what God is doing in the world now. That's it. So once again, we have to notice what Jesus is sharing with us. Jesus talked about signs. The board, I try to summarize all of them. 5 huge signs. He mentions all of them and tells the disciples, do not be alarmed. Don't. Because this is not the end. Is this not amazing, my friends? So notice, I grew up with the opposite of being alarmed because of signs. Of having the narcissistic feeling and the fear for not being ready. That was the deal. And Jesus says the opposite. Yes, signs, but don't be alarmed. It's not the end. A lot of what consumes our imagination, and I'm not just saying us here, but religious Christians all over the world, an interest these days is the Pope did this, the government did that, the vaccine is this, reptiles here and there, things like that. And I'm not here as a source of absolute truth to say, it's all wrong, let's go back. No, you can believe whatever you'd like. Go out and do your thing. What I am here to share with you is the words of Jesus. Those are signs, if they are even signs. And don't be alarmed. It's not the end. Simple as that. we hear of rumors and rumors and rumors, and as followers of Jesus, we alarm ourselves with signs, to the point that the sign does not become a reminder of the real thing, but the thing itself. So if there's one thing we must take from this story, is that the signs are signs, not the thing, not to be alarmed, not the end. And that we should not be alarmed or, as Jesus says, distracted, led astray by them. I lost so many years that when I look back, I said, man, I was caught up in so many other things. I wish I could have made more friends. I wish I could have done this and that. So caught up in my own little religious world. So yeah, not the end. So let's go to signs. Are we ready? Are we good? What time is it? 12:18. Can we go a little longer? Can I just go over quickly the list? Greg, you good? Let's do it. So I want to be honest. I don't want you to think that pastor doesn't care about signs. I do care about them. I'm just saying that I'm not alarmed by them. And I'm not going to go out home in despair because I think the end is here, because Jesus has taught us better. Signs are signs. Don't be alarmed. It's not the end. So now let's go over the list. Jesus gives the disciples some signs, symptoms, pointing to the things they are interested in: the end of the age, the destruction of the temple. The list, we've seen it all happen, right? In history, how many times have all these things happened? Hundreds and hundreds of times. So Jesus was right. He was giving insight as to what was things that had happened even before Jesus showed up. Wars and rumors of wars. This has happened. This is human nature. It'll happen. So let's try to figure this out together. So remember that the disciples, their vision is the temple will be destructed, and that happened shortly after Jesus died, right? A few years later, that did happen. So there are several things there in the minds of the disciples. So we have to be careful not to think, oh, this is all about the second coming. This is about this. We have to discern that Jesus is giving an insight as to the future that will cover a long sweep of historical history. There you go. Let's be redundant. Why not? All right. So let's go. Number one, false Christs. False Christs will come and they will lead you astray from the path of life, of mercy, of justice, of faithfulness. They'll confuse you. Even before Jesus, there were already many people saying that they were the Messiah, they were the people. By the way, Christ, word Messiah, what does it mean? The anointed, right? The one who is chosen by God to teach people, to herald in the end times. So how many Christs have we seen? I mentioned one back in the day who is related a bit to Adventism, the Koresh guy, right? In Waco, Texas, there are a series on it. Right? He presented himself, and you see the series, he was a very human, loyal, devoted guy to the Bible and everything else, but he presented himself as this Messiah sort of figure, that I have been chosen to give you something, to orient you because the end is here. And we know the end of that story. People died, shooting, guns, fire, horrible. I'm pretty sure God... What is happening here? I turned on my flashlight. Remember the moment of the song? All you need is love. Okay, turn that off. So you guys understand? Messiah figure. If I'm not around, or if I ever knock my head on a hike and come back saying, guys, we've been here long enough, I have withheld my identity to you. But I have been anointed by God to show you the end because the end is here. That's the moment where you say, all right, old Tiago warned us. Let's just walk out the door right now and go eat a burrito because it's not happening. All right? So let's just work together here. If that happens today or a decade from now, what are we doing? Walking out the door, getting into your car, and buy a burrito. All right? Are we together? Arturo. Door, car, burrito. Door, D, car, C, burrito. DCB. That's it. So are you understanding? False Christs, people who will come and distract, lead astray. That would have happened. It has happened over history. Those who not only present themselves as anointed figures with eschatological significance, but who provide others with a path of life in dissonance with the path of Jesus. Jesus said, go out and help the poor, help the kids. Why would I be locked up in a bunker somewhere else? Because do you understand the dissonance? We have to notice the dissonance. If the truth coming from the individual leads me away from people and places me alongside of the righteous ones who understood, I am so far from the way of Jesus that I don't even know where you are anymore. Are you with me? This is why the moment this little box that we call church here becomes a place where we feel so entitled about our truth that we don't care about the poor and the hungry and those who suffer within it, we are in bad shape, far from the path of Jesus. This is a place for the broken one. This is a place for those who don't have it all together, because this is a place where we find grace in Jesus. Period. You come as you are and remain there until Jesus does whatever He wants to do with you. I don't have like a list saying, okay, sis changed, so now she's in the next. No. We're all in this thing together. Number 2, wars and rumors of wars. Have we heard this before? Yes or no? Happening right now. Oof. This is an old one. Wars. Not only the wars themselves, Jesus says the wars, but speculation, right? Rumors about attacks that generate fear and anxiety for those who were alive during the Cold War. How was America back in those days? Whew. Missile crisis. The people just walk out of the street and say, yeah, we might all die from an existential threat, but hey, let's go out. Maybe this was Santa Fe back in the day. Let's just grab a burrito, and move forward. No, we live in fear and in anxiety, and that's a common way to manipulate the population. Spread rumors and just see what happens. So Jesus says, do not be alarmed by these things. So while preachers today and people, prophets all over, use current events to alarm people, to prepare the people for the end, there is no such prescription in Jesus in using the signs to alarm and to prepare a people to be ready. Rumors do not generate faith. I'll repeat it. Rumors, the Facebook link you got from somebody who gives you the scoop as to what's happening in the world, that won't bring you any closer to anything. Apart from the idea that you have an into whatever somebody else does not. Rumors don't generate faith. They do not place us in the world to serve. Another helpful hint there. If the truth you've received does not place you in the world to serve, then I'm pretty sure it's not the truth. If the truth you receive pushes you back into your bedroom to protect yourself from the doom that is coming, believe me, has nothing to do with the way of Jesus. They lead us away from people. They generate suspicion. So Jesus said, be careful. These things will lead you astray. Wars and rumors, speculation of things that are happening in the world today. 3, earthquakes and famines. Do I have to explain this one? It's happening right now. Just read the news right now. South America, Africa, here downtown. There's hunger everywhere. So it's all good. We've seen it. Signs. 4, persecution and death. It happened to the disciples. By the way, all the disciples who were listening to Jesus speak these words, guess how they died? Persecuted and killed. For what? For living the way of Jesus. For being kind. For being loving, for saying no to empire, for rescuing in Rome babies that were thrown away. They were placed in an awkward position and they were persecuted and killed. Not because they went out in front of, Planned Parenthood with a sign. Not because they went to the pride parade with the truth. No, they just lived as followers of Jesus. So they were persecuted and killed. Same down throughout history. Persecution and death, not for doctrine, not for days and years, but for the name of Jesus, for living in the way of Jesus. They were persecuted and dead. Has it happened in history? Yes or no? Oh, we can make a long list of people who were persecuted because of the name of Jesus. Martin Luther King, up there. All right, 5. Prophets. False prophets would come. There would be hate. There would be betrayal, people turning against other, and love would wither away. Friends, we've been 2 years into this COVID thing. Okay? 2 years. Coming from Obama to Trump, now into Biden. In Brazil, Lula and all the others that followed until Bolsonaro right now. And I lost count of the many times and messages I have received from people who said, my dad has thrown me out of my house because I disagree with him in regards to who I should vote for. I have not been speaking to my child because they don't understand what is happening in the government with the vaccine, and I cannot just sit with him anymore if he doesn't want truth. It's very hard to read these words today because we are seeing it happen right now. The betrayal, the people turning away from people, the hate against the other, and love growing cold. So let's step back and see if love growing cold is the end, and before that there is hate and betrayal and confusion. Jesus began this whole list with false prophets would come. Okay? False prophets, hate and confusion and betrayal, love growing cold. Are you guys with me? So I had a lot to say about this, but I'm going to just finish. I think it's enough here today. But this is an interesting combination. We do live in a time filled with prophets, with voices telling people what the will of God is and what to do to prepare for the future. These prophets love not only signs, but conspiracies. Love that which is underneath the lines. They have an insight into what's happening in the world that nobody else does. So here I must pause because we all, friends, and I include myself, we all are attracted to these things, okay? There's something in us that pulls us to these secret insights of what is happening in the world today. So here I must pause and try to teach you something I have learned and I considered very important. Let me share that with you right now. Just because something is reasonable to us, it does not make it true. I'm going to repeat it because this is very important. Just because it makes sense, it does not mean it is the truth. I'll give you an example. This week I had dreams when I was sleeping. Do you guys have dreams? Yeah? Have you had that naked one and I had to find clothes? I always hate that one when it comes around. But let me tell you the dream of this week. I was with Paula, my kids, in an airplane. Clint, you were not the guy, so don't worry. You're not the pilot. Up in the airplane somewhere, I don't know, it looked like, if I'm going to try to make a connection in my head, like the Faroe Islands, Iceland, that area. Rocky, green, volcanic, so that's sort of where we were. In something, because this always happens because I'm afraid of airplanes, so obviously there's always something wrong with the airplane, right? I always have those dreams. I hate it because I have to catch a flight in 4 hours. Anyway, plane, there's a problem. I try to reach for my kids, and the plane lands in like a main highway in, let's say, the Faroe Islands. Hits a car. But we're safe. And we're good. And I'm always relieved. It's like, didn't die. Like I can go any other way, but please, Lord, not airplanes. Okay. So we walk out of the airplane, middle of this road, and I'm describing to you because I remember all the details, right? So and the first thing that we thought was, we need to find housing. So we just started looking for housing, just walking the street and looking for where we're going to live. So I can continue telling you the dream, but it's just crazy. But guess what? In the dream, everything made great sense to me. I was like, yeah, honey, we need to find a house. Yeah. No, that's not like go to the hospital. No, let's go find a house. Are you guys understanding what I'm saying? Just because it makes sense to you does not mean it's real or it's true. There is this, and this is the birth of philosophy, by the way. Birth of philosophy was when people just looked outside and said, what if? The world out there is not necessarily what I'm perceiving it to be. And suddenly all of these questions started rising. How do we know that things are really the way I perceive them to be? Because we live in a society that sort of distinguishes emotions from reason. Don't we live in that? Oh, that's just our emotions. We need to be reasonable. And then you don't realize that being reasonable includes a lot of emotion and a lot of assumptions that we don't even know are there. So whatever makes sense to you right now, believe me, doesn't make it true. just because it's reasonable to you or to me. And suddenly we feel, or we place ourselves in this uncomfortable space of faith, where we know we don't have all the answers, but maybe, just maybe, there is more to my ideas, my conclusions, my feelings about things. So prophets, false prophets would come, and we need to just understand that whatever makes sense to your mind about the end, prophecy, vaccines, the government, it must be a great thing. You must have it all figured out in your mind. But because you have it figured out, it doesn't make it true. I'm sorry. What is true? What is real? Community. That's true. Being there in the life of one another, embracing one another, learning how to live in love with one another. That is real. That is concrete. We can observe that. We can see it with our eyes. It's not behind some government wall, behind a code online. I don't know what is happening with the government. I already talked about it before. I wish I knew. Therefore, I'm not going to talk about it. Why? Because I have no idea what's happening. I wish I knew. But I'm not going to be alarmed. And what am I going to focus on? On not leading you all astray. Keeping myself and our community in the way of Jesus. That is not a set of ideas, but a way to live right now. So I think I spoke enough. So yeah, maybe one last thing about conspiracy theories. Is that okay? Number one, they make sense. Just because they make sense doesn't make them true. That's number one. Number two, they make us feel safe. And that's, I think, the greatest pull of the whole thing, because you feel like you know enough to not be deceived. So let's talk about safety for a second. These false prophecies and conspiracies have a phenomenal fail-safe. What is the fail-safe? They are error-proof. Let's say you believe that inside of whatever people there's a lizard in it. Did you guys read the news that the guy killed his children because he thought there were lizards growing inside of them? Did you read that? It made sense to him. He killed children. Are you guys understanding this? It made sense to him. Now, if you came to the guy, obviously he had mental problems and everything else, but believe me, there are a lot of people without mental problems putting forth a lot of craziness still. If you come to them and say, I don't believe you, immediately they say, oh, then I'm sorry, you're going to be deceived. If you say, I believe you, said, oh, then good, you're part of the group. There is no error. There is no way to say, you know what if? And the way to break down these constructions that we have in our mind is just pointing to the fact that details sometimes don't fit our narrative. That's why I'm trying to give you guys some keys here to understand that if it doesn't place you as Jesus taught us to be in the world, then maybe there's something off. If it leads you away from people, then maybe there's something off. If it's more about protecting myself than serving others, then maybe there's something off. These are keys that we must carry to evaluate our heart, our mind, so that our imagination is not sickened, and so that we are not led astray by distractions, signs, and false prophecies. These truths out there are safe and real because they're bulletproof. If you believe, you're in. If you don't, I'm sorry, you didn't read enough. You didn't click on enough links as I have. Watched YouTube enough to the point that we can't even trust our doctors anymore. Because, I'm sorry, doctor, I studied online and you didn't get the whole picture. Do you understand? This is our society right now. And I don't know what to do. I sincerely don't know what to do. It's overwhelming, it's confusing, and it takes a toll on our emotional health. Because we are only humans because we have social bounds. We have trust in one another. As a community, we nurture trust in one another. And when that thing is broken by whatever is happening out there, suddenly I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And suddenly we start distancing ourselves from everybody else. And that is the sign that we are being led astray. Because suddenly we are by ourselves and there's nobody around. So I talked about how lawlessness truly appears there when love grows cold and not when we cease keeping commandment A, B, or C. So my friends, what does bring the end? Are you guys ready to go? I'm ready to go. I'm hungry already. I need to eat. Let's end this thing. What does bring the end? What is the thing according to Jesus that we are sure that is the one thing that we know will bring forth the end? He says it. Then the gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed, will be embodied. and the end will come. Will it be preached? We think it's preaching, speaking words in the whole world, and then when it reaches the last guy in the last island, that's not what Jesus is saying. As you go, as you embody, as you live in serving, in kindness, and in love for others, as you move toward the end will come and you won't even notice it. Because I do not want you to be distracted. I want you to keep proclaiming and living this gospel of the kingdom. So there we have it, friends. Persevering in that love, that is what will deliver us, that will save us, that will liberate us to live now. Now, participating in what God is doing in the world now. What is the cross? The cross is the future coming to all of us and saying, yes, it's taken care of. We don't have to live in fear, to live in the shadow of the cross, to embody that gospel. That's what Jesus told his disciples to do. So here we are. That is the narrow way, the way that society doesn't like, because either you're in or you're out. You have to make a choice, but to be in that place where you're embracing people instead of fleeing from them, that's the narrow way, today and every day. So my dear friends, are we together? Yes or no? I hope you're not too uncomfortable, but I'm just sharing my experience in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where I was, where I am, and where I hope to be with you. Not led astray, but walking in the way of Jesus until the end comes. And we won't even realize it. Like, oh, okay. Then Jesus says, welcome into my kingdom. We're going to get there in chapter 28. Welcome into my kingdom, because when I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. You visited me in prison. And then people will say, of course, Pastor Tiago told us to do all those things. We knew about all those things. No, their answer is, when did we do all these things? Because it was just part of our life. There is, in the preaching of the gospel, a holy unawareness. Because we're so caught up in the way of Jesus, in living, that we're not distracted, that we're not alarmed. We're just living the end now. So we're not worried about the end, because it's part of who we are. It's almost our name, Advent, life, right now. Dear God, thank you. And may we grow together as a community that is not led astray. Keep us by your Spirit in the path of Jesus today and every day until the last day. I pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. Friends, thank you for coming. Be blessed, and above all things, be kind. Okay? I'll see you next week.